The American wife is not far away from her husband's hometown in Iran. As soon as she gets off the plane, she is asked to wear a Muslim black robe, because once she fails to obey, the wife may be shot at any time. However, just as she stepped into the door, a Muslim believer holding a weapon quickly rushed in. The reason was that the woman's headband did not completely cover her hair. The men tried to calm the situation and stood in front of the emotional soldiers. The women hurriedly helped Ira adjust her headband to make sure that each hair was properly covered. The soldiers gradually calmed down. For this Native American, he can't understand the traditions here. She was killed on the first day she arrived. But fortunately, she just accompanied her husband to visit her relatives in her hometown. They will return to the United States in a week. But when Ira struggled to get through this day, she found that her husband seemed to have no plans to leave. Upon inquiring, she learned that her husband had already resigned from his job in the United States. She didn't plan to go back at all. Even including Ira and her daughter, she was not allowed to leave. This news was certainly a revelation to Ira. What followed was her strong resistance. Usually, a warm and elegant husband beat himself for the first time. And this is just the beginning of her hard life. In order to return to the country smoothly, Ira had no choice but to ask for help from her elders to spread the word. But when she grieved and complained about her unfortunate experience, she did not get the understanding and support she expected. On the contrary, she was accused by her husband's family. All the male members have been asking her not to offend her husband. What surprised her even more was that even the women around her began to criticize her. On this land, the concept of men's wisdom is deeply rooted in every corner. Even women have to follow the trend. Ira felt an unprecedented despair in such an environment. But at the same time, she also realized that only by relying on her own strength can she find true liberation. She hurriedly collected every penny in her pocket in the hope of finding a chance to buy a return ticket. But what surprised her was that in order to stop her from leaving, her husband took away her passport. Although she had enough money, she could not go home without a passport. Ira, who was in a dilemma, had no choice but to ask for help from the embassy. But now it is 1984. Iran had severed diplomatic relations with the United States 4 years ago. So the U.S. Embassy has long ceased to exist here. So Ira went to the U.S. Embassy in Switzerland. There, she saw someone who had the same skin color as her, which lit the fire in her heart again. But when she told her about her dilemma, the response of the staff erased all her hopes. Since Ira had married an Iranian, according to the law of the country, Ira is now regarded as an Iranian citizen. And without the consent of her husband, Ira will not be able to leave freely. At the same time, women have almost no say in their children's custody. Once the marriage is broken, the children's custody will automatically return to their fathers. For Ira, this means that she will not be able to take her children back to the United States, and even the possibility of returning to the United States is very slim. Although the staff at the embassy sympathized with her situation, but they seemed to be unable to provide any actual assistance. Inevitably, Ira can only return home disappointed, and wait for her right-hand husband to beat her again. After this cruel lesson, Ira began to pretend to obey, trying to relax her husband's guard. She not only actively helped her family take care of her children, but also learned Islamic education. But even so, she was still deprived of the freedom to go out alone. Her husband always sent people to monitor her every move. But even in this situation, Ira has never given up hope of escape. One day, she finally got a chance. Because there was no food in the house, Ira wanted to go out to buy food. But surprisingly, her husband agreed to her request for the first time. However, this permission contains clear conditions. She must return within the specified time, and strictly carry her daughter with her. Her husband's wife's weakness was that only if she did not take her daughter with her, Ira would not have the possibility of escaping. After arriving at the market, Ira wanted to exchange the dollars in her hand for coins in order to use public telephone to get in touch with her relatives in the United States. This generous gesture of the boss also made Ira feel a different warmth for the first time in her hometown. During the call, although Ira lowered her voice cautiously, the boss still sensed her intentions. When leaving, the boss told Ira with a generous attitude that he had seen many foreigners being kept in Iran. He said enthusiastically that if necessary, he could seek help from her at any time. This unexpected gesture was like a spring breeze that rekindled the fire of hope in Ira's heart. The two of them shook hands. Soon after, Ira got another chance. On the day of her daughter's first day of school, her husband decided to let Ira accompany her daughter to school the next day. This also created a new opportunity for her to go out. Then Ira came to the clothing store again. The boss hurriedly led her into the store. It was at this moment that Ira realized that the boss's shirt store was just her side business. Then a man carefully planned a way for her to escape and only needed $10,000 to safely arrive in the United States. But at this moment, there was no need to pay. After she regained her freedom and set foot on American soil, she recalculated. Because in Iran, the value of the US dollar is much higher than the local currency. Nevertheless, the escape plan still needed time to prepare. Ira couldn't stay here for too long. So after a brief understanding, she rushed to school with her daughter. But fate is cruel. Just because she was late for a few minutes, her husband had already arrived at school. Waiting for her is like waiting for a beating. And her husband didn't care about the feelings of his daughter. The eyes of the women on the other side looked at her as if her husband's lesson to his wife was obvious. On the way back, Ira chose to escape while her husband was paying the fare. But her husband didn't seem to be in a hurry. He believed that as long as his daughter was there, Ira would not really leave. Unexpectedly, Ira returned to school soon. She begged the principal to let her take her daughter away, but the principal refused, because only the father was given the right to do so. Ira had no choice but to wait in the office for her husband to pick up the child. As soon as she got home, her husband locked her up in an empty room. Until then, Ira cut off all contact with the outside world. The only thing that her husband occasionally sent was food. In this closed space, she not only had to suffer loneliness, but also felt the fear of emptiness. Time flew by, and her daughter's birthday suddenly came. Her husband decided to remove the ban on Ira and spend this special day with her daughter. Although Ira had already spent a long night in isolation, she was not overwhelmed by this dilemma. She found another chance to pick up the child, and then quickly went to the street. In the past year, they had prepared everything for Ira. It was on January 29th, 10 days later. Ira unexpectedly received a call from her mother that her father was seriously ill and needed surgery. She passed this heavy message to her husband. Unexpectedly, her husband surprised her and let her go home to see. Ira was stunned and surprised. At night, Ira prepared a lavish dinner. She testily asked her husband if her whole family would return to China together. Her husband was furious. He never intended to return to the United States. This time, he agreed to Ira's return just to get rid of her property in the United States and then return with all the money. And his daughter could not travel with him. Ira firmly opposed this arrangement, but her husband was determined and even prepared a visa and a 3-day flight for her. In the end, Ira found the right person again and told her that she might need to go back first and then run away with the child. However, her husband reminded her that when she came back, her daughter might already be someone else's daughter-in-law. In Iran, children's marriages are often said early. This is a part of the custom. Now that the war has not yet spread, it is better to flee as soon as possible. But her husband has already bought a 3-day flight for her. This means that Ira must leave here in just 3 days. This inadvertently made things worse. But God also seems to want to help her. A call from an emergency called her husband to work overtime at the hospital. Ira seized this sudden opportunity and left with her daughter quickly. On the way, the mother and daughter came to the connector. At nightfall, the boss arranged a special car for them. After a long night, the car slowly passed by the desolate Gobi Desert. They finally got a short break. But in a moment of peace, the driver suddenly broke in. Like a typhoon, everything was swept away, and Ira's wealth was gone. In the face of language barriers and wilderness isolation, Ira dared not resist and only hoped to get through this disaster safely. After a short break, they set off again. On the way, they encountered a dense checkpoint. However, every time they had to go through the difficulties of the driver's visa. At nightfall, they reached the final checkpoint. Ira, a partner, took the initiative to attract the attention of the border guards. The driver quietly led the mother and daughter through the checkpoint. Without the car's support, the harsh weather made their journey more difficult. But fate didn't seem to give up on them completely. After endless waiting, the driver finally found a 1,000-mile horse. Relying on this horse, the mother and daughter barely crossed the mountains. After 2 long nights, they were about to reach the finish line. Not far away was the connector. This also indicated that the driver's mission was about to be completed. At the moment of farewell, the driver handed Ira a bag of things. Then he whispered in a low-pitched voice and told her that Turkey was in front of him. Ira opened the bag as soon as she got in the car. Surprised, she found precious things in it that the driver had once taken away. This is when she realized that the driver's actions were to protect them. Otherwise, they would have become violent victims on the way. In the end, the mother and daughter finally arrived at the border town of Turkey. Surrounding the country, the flag of the American consulate was not far away. Their long and difficult journey to escape was finally over. This story is based on real events. There are many parents and children trapped in a country like Ira. May all those who long for freedom find their way back home.